Thank you, colleagues from CGIAR, our partners, and those who are joining this group. I cannot see the list of participants with names to see if there's any familiar names or not, but everybody welcome. Today, it's a CGIAR session, and we will talk about, we'll launch the EvalSDG guidelines on evaluating quality of science, and we will present example of application of the guidelines, and we will hear from our colleagues and task team leads of the evaluations about their reflections, evaluating with CGIAR and comparing to other agencies that they have evaluated in. So with that, I would like to ask for the PowerPoint presentation to come in. Thank you, Ziad. Ziad is welcoming everybody as well. Thank you. Good seeing Ziad. Others, please feel free to say where you're joining from. Thank you. So maybe we'll move on to the slides, Federica.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. Here it comes. You should be seeing the screen. Yes.
Thank you. So we'll move to the agenda. There are two parts to the agenda. One is where we will provide training for evaluations in CGIAR and specifically how to evaluate quality of science and why we evaluate quality of science. Then we will have 5 minutes for Q&A on general concepts of training. And then we'll move into the very concrete example of evaluating science groups and reflections from our team leaders. And of course, then the discussion will follow. We're open. We have a lot of people from our side, and we welcome questions from the audience and engagement on this topic. Thank you. Next. So for those of you who are new to CGIAR, it's very important that we explain a little bit visually what it is that CGIAR, because it's not an organization that a lot of people know. So CGIAR is a global research partnership for food security future dedicated to transforming food, land, and water systems in the climate crisis. CGIAR is a consortium organization of centers, research centers, and right now there are 13 that are members of CGIAR consortium, and they are located primarily in the global south. And of the abbreviations and the titles of the centers, you might see some that are familiar. For example, IFPRI, International Food and Policy Research Institute, which is actually the only one that is not located in the global south. It's in Washington, D.C. And then some of you may know SIP, International Potato Center, the World Fish in Malaysia, IRI, which is the International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, and so on and so forth. So it's a global coverage of very important work, and the centers are the leads basically in research in those domains that they manage. Thank you. Next. The CGIAR work, the portfolio implementation is driven by CGIAR research and innovation strategy, which also is 2030 strategy, very conveniently with SDGs, and we will talk about SDGs, of course. And the central to the strategy are the two concepts of research and science. And those on the left are definitions that are used in the strategy, and they are important because, of course, there may be disagreements of what research or science is in other contexts, but in CGIAR we have to use the concepts from our research strategy. So research is generation and communication of data, information, and knowledge on an empirical basis, and science is rigorous theory-based approaches. And on the right, you see the very colorful graph, which basically highlights in boxes, gray boxes, instances where the word science is used, which is a lot. So we have science groups, we have action areas, systems transformation, action areas, which are also science groups as well. And then on top, what is important are the impact areas, which are basically aligned to SDGs. So 5 impact areas are aligned to SDGs. So moving on. For a multilateral development organization, partially which CGIAR is, of course, there's framing documents. We have evaluation framework, evaluation policy, and framework is pretty standard with standards and principles of how we do evaluations. And evaluation policy highlights the evaluation criteria. And for many of you in the graph, you will see the familiar criteria such as relevance, coherence, efficiency, which are OSDGs. But for us, the new one, and the one that we use a lot to complementing the standard OSDGs criteria is quality of science. And quality of science in our context is considered to be encompass credibility and legitimacy. And it's based, this concept understanding of quality of science is based on the quality of research for development framework, which is the CGIAR document that presents an agreement on the nature of how to assess research quality in our research for development context. Moving on. In the continuum of where evaluations lie in our context, which partially is similar to other organizations but has some specificities, is the research continuum, basically. So the preparation of the research proposals is and ex-ante reviews of them are conducted by our colleagues at the Independent Science for Development Council, and evaluations, and we're talking specifically about process and performance evaluations, not impact assessments, are done on the research portfolio. And evaluations, of course, are driven by the framework, the standards and guidelines that are issued in support of those. And highlighted in yellow is the guidelines on evaluating quality of science. And it says many more words. It's basically called applying for CGIAR, a quality of research for development framework to evaluations. But in essence, it's about evaluating quality of science in post evaluations. Thank you. The guidelines are reflected in the brief that we are launching today. It is the first time that we are publicly presenting the EvalSDG Insight, and the link will be reshared with you in the chat box. And basically, the brief, the EvalSDG Insight is a brief. Oops. Okay, so maybe not. Yeah, exactly. So sorry. The brief is basically a condensed version of the guidelines with a specific focus on. So go back, Federico. Sorry. With a specific focus on SDG 8. Why it is important to evaluate quality of science towards evaluating and understanding the achievements of sustainable development goals. The objectives of the guidelines and the brief are to bring together kind of the understanding of why it is important and what is the recommended way to do it, what are the approaches and the methods, and how to use this type of information. Thank you. Next. A couple of examples of applying specifically the guidelines were on the gender platform evaluation, which we conducted last year. We finished that, and we will share the link to this later. And actually, yesterday we had an event about that. And this is to provide visually, basically, how it was applied. There is dimensions on the left, on the kind of flowery picture, the dimensions of outputs, research design, inputs, and process. And they do map to the standard evaluation criteria. In that particular case, we did not actually use quality of science criteria because it was not the intent of the platform to actually deliver science. So the decisions need to be made in collaboration with the evaluant, and they requested that we do not look at quality of science because of their mission. But what is important is that enablers of a high quality science were considered. What is the credibility and legitimacy? And they were looked at into how the processes have laid out and how the teams, the research teams have worked in bringing the evidence to the platform. Next. Another good example is of SDGs directly. Is the use of bibliometric methods in evaluating quality of science. It is one of the methods. And the work we conducted with the Science Matrix, which is a very well-respected organization in the domain of bibliometrics, they basically did an analysis of the publications and comparators, meaning organizations that do research for development, such as IDRC, for example, in Canada. And they looked at how thematic those papers, basically outputs, products, those peer-reviewed publications, how they align with SDGs. So this is the type of analysis that was very helpful, but it helps understanding that there is science behind how SDGs are measured and what, towards the achievement of SDGs. Next. This is the slide that kind of highlights the type of work and products that we, from the evaluation function, have produced related to evaluating quality of science, such as reviews of the research programs, the summary of evidence on applying quality of science criterion, and the type of information that you can obtain from the evaluations in a summary way about science in particular. Also, how to apply the bibliometric analysis, application of social network analysis is one of the methods we recommend. And so this will be, this is all their links, but we can also send later link to the publication site. And with that, I think I'll give the floor to my colleague to take us to the concrete examples of applied science group evaluations.
Okay, thank you, Svetlana. Next, please. Hi everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. I will continue talking more about the approach and methodology of the 3 science groups evaluation that we are implementing. And I believe many of you are coming from the evaluation professional domain, so you are very interested, I believe, about the approach of real-time learning evaluation. So as you can see in the slide, we have the standard criteria. You can see that we have coherence and quality of science, important criteria in the context of CGIAR. Among the evaluation questions from the guidelines, 2 were considered very important and relevant for this specific evaluation, which are the extent to which the management processes of science groups ensure the quality of science, including credibility, legitimacy, relevance to next users. And the second question is, to what extent, in what ways are the research outputs by the science groups of high quality and influential? Science groups are three portfolio of CGIAR work. Their names: genetic innovation, resilience and agri-food system, and system transformations. So all the portfolio of CGIAR was divided through these 3 important topics. We relied on subject matter experts for the analysis of quality of science, especially credibility and legitimacy. And in the next slide, I will show you the composition of the team. So we had 3 evaluation teams. Each evaluation team is in charge of evaluating 1 science group. So you see to the left graphs, and then system transformation, and then genetic innovation. And we have the opportunity today to have 2 team leaders with us, Natascia Palmieri and Krishna. They will walk you through their reflections on this experience that is still ongoing. And as you see, also we, as part of each team, we have subject matter experts, because it's about science. We needed experts on different topics that are relevant. And before starting in the scoping phase of this evaluation, we consulted a lot with the evaluation teams to also identify what are the subjects that are of relevance for them, especially for learning, because it's a real-time learning evaluation. Next, please. So I will not talk in details about the methodology. So as you can see, it's standard methodology, predominantly qualitative, but we had also a very successful online survey. When I say successful, that we received a very good response rate, including from entities external to our system, which was a good milestone. So we have case studies of 3 evaluation methods relied on case studies, and subject matter experts were in charge of these case studies. We had field trips to specific countries of relevance to the 3 science groups, and we collaborated with another office in CGIAR, which is internal audit, and they were also conducting a survey, and we collaborated together, and we included questions related to efficiency in their survey. So this evaluation is, we adopted a real-time learning approach because CGIAR is going through a redesign of portfolio, and next year a new portfolio will start, and the organization needed real-time learning from these 3 evaluations to inform decisions that are being made this period of time. So next slide, I will show you ideas that we implemented to share the knowledge that we were collecting through the 3 science group, through the 3 evaluation teams. So the first is the terms of reference that is online. If you are interested to know more about the framework background, you can check the terms of reference. And the second is the approach of selection of case studies and deep dives. We thought that it was important at the inception phase to share this approach with the evaluant teams and management, so they understand the rationale behind selecting the specific case studies. Then, because when we will have the evaluation reports, we know that it will be too late for the system to learn from evidence. We developed each month an issue of insights from across the 3 evaluation. And here the 3 external evaluation team, they collaborated with us, with our evaluation function, and we collected inputs from the 3 teams, and we summarized and shared with the system, shared through sharing the document, and also we had several sessions, learning sessions, where we shared already what we are hearing. As evaluators, you may question the validity of these findings because the data collection phase is still ongoing. We were confident about to share this evidence because this evidence is coming, or findings are coming from 3 parallel evaluation teams. So, and also we had a lot of interviews and document reviews. So when we have a strong confidence about something that is repeated through the 3 science groups, we felt that we are confident enough to share with the system so they can learn. Next, please. Okay, then I will give the floor to Natascia, the team leaders of the RAF's science group evaluation team. Over to you, Natascia.
Hello everybody. I am Natascia Palmieri. I am an evaluation independent consultant. I have been working with FAO, ILO, ministries of foreign affairs and NGOs in the area of evaluation. And I'm currently working on this CGIAR science group evaluation. In particular, I'm leading the Resilient Agri-Food System science group evaluation. Well, have been asked to speak about my personal experience in evaluating science related interventions, which are quite different from development interventions. So the first aspect that I would like to underline is the fact that it has been very useful having a conceptual framework of reference, which are the CGIAR guidelines on evaluating the quality of science for development. Because in the past, I found myself in assessing development projects or programs that had a research or scientific component inside. Of course, among other components, but in a way, I found myself evaluating the quality of science without having a conceptual framework of reference, which was quite challenging. So in that case, for example, I was just able to look at the extent of relevance of the scientific deliverables to the end users, or to, for example, the quality of capacity building that was carried out for partners, and the likelihood of potential uptake and dissemination. But I was not able at all, for example, to look at the quality itself of the scientific deliverables, and nor the quality of the process adopted in terms of methodologies, in terms of inputs, such as human resources and equipment. So it was quite challenging, and I think that in that case, the analysis was missing important elements that in this case we were able to consider thanks to the existence of these CGIAR guidelines on how to evaluate the quality of science for development. In the meantime, another important aspect has been the fact that subject matter experts are involved in this evaluation. And this is really important because they are the ones who are looking particularly at the quality of science, because as an evaluator, I may not have the technical skills needed to evaluate the quality of the scientific outputs delivered, for example, or the quality of the processes, methodologies adopted. So this is another important aspect. And in the case of the evaluation that I am carrying out, we have experts on crops, livestock, and fishery. Well, going to, let's say, differences and challenges of this type of work, evaluating science-related interventions. One important aspect I would like to underline is the fact that identifying tangible results may be difficult in this type of evaluation. While evaluating science-related intervention, it is more challenging to identify tangible results compared to development interventions. It is not meant that development interventions can have immediate and tangible results, but we should consider that it has been argued, for example, that for scientific outputs to be delivered and for changes in society and changes in practice arising from science-related interventions, it might need from 5 to 20 years. So if you consider, for example, the time needed to develop a scientific output, including the testing phase, the uptake, and the likelihood of achieving results from those outputs, well, actually, it is needed more time. So this has implication for us as evaluators, because it is more likely, depending on the period in which the initiatives, the project were launched, and in our case, it is 2022, meaning that the initiatives that we are assessing have a 2-year period of existence. So it is more likely for us to be able to look at the likelihood of having results, of achieving results, rather than to look at tangible results in this short period of implementation. Another important aspect is related to which stakeholders we should involve in the data collection, which is linked to who are the end users or final beneficiaries of this type of interventions. Well, what I have learned, and that in science-related interventions, the main end users, final beneficiaries, are research institutes and government departments. But at the same time, I have found several initiatives involving what we normally consider as final beneficiaries in development cooperation, meaning community members, farmer organizations, individual farmers. So sometimes we got confused on who are actually the final beneficiaries of this intervention and who do we have to involve in the data collection phase? So this is something that I think should be clarified very well since the inception phase. And another important, let's say, lesson or aspect that I had to consider is how to ascribe results to the specific period which is under the scope of the evaluation. In our case, we have to identify results in the period 2022-2024. But as it was said by many interviewees, research is a continuum. I think Ibtissem or Svetlana were mentioning this aspect. So again, it is more challenging to being able to attribute results to a specific period. And it is very difficult to differentiate results achieved in the period under the scope of the evaluation from the legacy work. And this is something, again, that should deserve attention from the inception phase. And similarly, stakeholders that we meet during the evaluation may not have such a clear understanding of the specific outcomes and the peculiarities of this type of interventions. So they, again, could be more prone to want to see immediate results, outcomes, tangible results. So this implies to being able to always constantly reframe the conversation with them, explaining that these are different types of intervention. So scientific outputs and societal changes may require additional times. So as conclusion, I would say that it has been very useful to have these guidelines. And I think these are useful not only for science-related interventions, but again for development ones as well, because also development interventions always have technical solutions being developed, no? So especially in the agriculture domain. So I think these are very useful to have tools to analyze the quality of the science, of the technical solutions delivered through the projects. And of course, there is a need to reframe a bit some aspects on which we are used to working on as evaluators. Thank you.
Natascia, thank you so much. And now we have Krishna, who is leading another team, and he will talk about his reflections on this evaluation and the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Hi, everyone. In terms of my background, I have a long background in policy analysis, work with policy research and some analytical work with also program management from evaluation, but about 15 years of career in managing and leading big evaluations through the Evaluation Office of New York. So the UNICEF's approach is largely program evaluation. So I'm supposed to reflect a little bit on comparing program evaluations with the quality of science evaluations, and then draw some lessons, as my colleague had just said, based on the science group evaluations that was focusing on system transformation. If we look at the design of a country program evaluation, country programs are based on very comprehensive needs assessment, contextual analysis, stakeholder analysis. Also, they look at policy aspects, need for service delivery, supply side, need for communication, including behavior change strategies, capacity building. So that's a very lengthy process. And all of that converges into a country strategy and country program. And when that is evaluated, of course, all of the OECD DAC criteria are very relevant. Some are more relevant than the less. And many of these programs also have policy research, sometimes other type of research, applied operations research, that also inform the programming. So when that aspect is analyzed, it's all built into the criteria. There is no separate evaluation or assessment of the research for development component or quality of research. So this experience was very different because first when we looked at it, of course, CG is the whole TOC, looking at research input, knowledge input is much more linear with strong assumptions there in terms of impact pathways. Is very much unlike country program and country program evaluation. So it's a very different way of characterizing the evaluation. There are differences with respect to methodology, and there are many other implications as well. Similarly, when we look at the theory of change for a country program, there is a very detailed aspect in terms of conditionalities as to how different outputs and outcomes are interconnected all the way to outcome. And there can be many pathways to change. And that's how sometimes we have very detailed theory of change with many linkages transcribed within those. If we look at the, and then that's what is used in terms of doing effectiveness analysis or impact analysis. Country program evaluations in general focus on effectiveness, but it does allow, depending on data availability, go all the way to impact. Whereas when we look at the CGIAR TOCs, and especially looking at last 2 years, what we're evaluating, we were limited in terms of how much one could explore in terms of data collection and looking at criteria such as effectiveness and impact. Also, if we look at the pathways, is quite linear as compared to the TOCs of program evaluation, where there can be all kinds of linkages depending on very specific country and local context, as well as the program characteristics. And the quality of indicators, because when we look at development programs, especially at the country level, evaluations can use data from census, data from household surveys, if they want to look at information like coverage, sometimes impact as well. So the scope is also the information systems development, information systems, sectoral, cross-sectoral. So that all is done because normally country programs are owned jointly by government and the specific agencies in many cases. Even the evaluations, the way they are done, is of joint nature. It's more and more becoming common. Whereas if we look at the quality of science indicators, they are again large in number, very specific to looking at inputs, very heavy on processes, and then management and output. So it's a very different architecture. Each of them have their own pros and cons, but something to be thoughtful about. One issue that also highlighted by my colleague, who was the previous speaker, was that in the particular assessment we did, we gave a lot of emphasis on looking at outputs coming off science, but not going beyond that. And even there, the output relates to bibliometric analysis, number of publications, number of blogs, journal articles, guidelines, and so on. And they can be hundreds, sometimes many, several hundreds, even in the short term. But if you look at development programs, the way outputs are measures, they're already defined as indicators that relate to system level changes, also behavior level changes or coverage. So there's a little bit of difference in how we look at output in QoS assessment vis-a-vis in country program evaluations. That I think is something important to discuss. Next, please. Yeah, next slide. Now, these are some of the lessons that came from the science group evaluation so far. And again, as with the other teams, our own learning is that it's very useful to have a mixed team, which includes dedicated subject matter specialists, scientists, researchers, combined with evaluation experts. That has worked well, and there are lots of lessons within that in terms of how to make it work even better. When we look at the system side, the scope was to look at the complexity of the food, land, and water systems. Now, what this requires is a very good understanding of country level context, because these systems live at the country and at the local level. Although there is global level system as well, but when it relates to actually looking at the scope of the research, science, how it influences change, those changes relate to country level changes, local level changes. But then when you look at the way the evaluation was designed, both in terms of its scope, the evaluant, as well as the way that time was allocated, availability of data, it was limiting to do a comprehensive analysis, even though looking at processes and performance, output level performance in the short term. So there's a lot of learning from that too as well, in terms of how an evaluation should be designed and conducted if we are looking at transformational changes. The other point is that if we really want to look at the effectiveness, or even what we keep using as potential effectiveness or potential to influence, when we ask those questions, they're hard. It might be easy to say that we can assess potential effectiveness or potential to be influential, but there can be all kinds of biases who we are asking in terms of potential of use and influence, and even how to assess that and distill and make conclusions. So here again, it may be relevant to include effectiveness criteria more explicitly while assessing the quality of science itself, although the broader evaluation that we looked at used effectiveness, sustainability, and coherence as well. But I think limiting QoS to the output level in terms of the 4 dimensions can be very limiting. So that's one thing I would like to posit. And I was looking at the literature on research for development. There, they do emphasize effectiveness. And I think in the previous presentation by Svetlana, there was a mention, and I think again, I think it's all evolving the way I see this coming from past learning and the realities, but it's good to be clear what we are looking at, because the world that links scientific research and science to development is extremely complex and vast. And there are many, many actors in that world which warrant clarity, if I may emphasize it that way. Now, if we look at specific considerations in terms of contribution of QoS criteria for assessing transformative work, I think the importance of, I would like to highlight the importance of multisectorality, because if you look at development change, even at intermediate level, it's when different actors work together. Is science in terms of if you look at technology, commodity-based science, combined with behavioral change, that's when one brings effectiveness and impact. When I was visiting Bangladesh, a research leader there, I would say, made it very clear that why not we focus more on adoption research, because suddenly countries themselves are doing a lot of research in terms of breeding, but also we have CG system, very comprehensive breeding and other types of research, but adoption is left behind. So this is what happens when we say that bring in behavior change element together with technical commodity and product-based research to get synergy. And again, the evaluation will be complex. It will have implementation too. So I think it has implication both for planning as well as evaluation. Same thing applies with policy and data, how we combine data influence with policy influence and with behavioral research to bring about real change in terms of influencing system. When we start thinking these ways, I think there are major implications on how we start evaluation, scope it by looking at a country context, what's going on, even local context, how we look at the stakeholders, and position the evaluation in terms of its wider scope, the design component, and also how it's managed in terms of time frame, resources, data availability, and so on. And obviously, my last point is that we need to think seriously about how to go beyond output to contributions of the science, the quality of science through evaluations, so that we more clearly know about policies, how they're influencing policies and larger change for transformation. This has come out a number of times when we were conducting evaluations. So this is not only from the researcher side, but also many stakeholders want CG to be very much development, change, and system transformation focused research and evaluation minded. So I wanted to just conclude it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Krishna, for such thoughtful reflections. So we would like to open the floor to questions or your reflections, and I want to acknowledge quite a few links that were shared in the chat box by our colleagues, including on the field work by Natascia and Krishna. I think Krishna's link is coming up from Bangladesh. So this is kind of ongoing learning because we are not yet presenting the results. So the floor is yours, colleagues and partners, gLOCAL partners. You can use the chat box or the Q&A. Ziad, are you still there? Maybe you can share reflections. Okay. Quiet. Either we overwhelmed everybody with the amount of information, or we underwhelmed you with the detail. Okay, we have a good one. Question for both Krishna and Natascia from Dilian, who is in evaluation for science. And sorry, I don't, because I cannot see the face, how it's different from the usual development type of project. And I think that, we touched upon this a little bit in the reflections, but also in the explanation of the approach. But maybe what is the one big difference that each of you can highlight to respond to this question? Natascia, first.
Well, as said, I think that the big difference is in terms of what are the expected outcomes from the two types of projects interventions, which may differ quite a lot. And it should, I think, also clarified further from the organization itself, because I've found many, as said, stakeholders in the field that were waiting for, tangible outcomes, probably within a short time frame. So I think it could be very useful to conceptualize more the different type of results which are expected from a science-related intervention compared to a development one. Of course, this is science for development, so the final objective aim is again development, but in which time frame, this should be clarified further, because, for example, I found theory of change for a 3-year period proposal or initiative that was very much related to impact, outcome level, results among communities, among farmer organizations, which could seem quite unrealistic, no, within a 3-year period of time, considering that there is the time needed to develop scientific outputs, the pilot phase, testing, and the capacity building, etc. So I think it is important to maybe to have more clarity on what are the results that we expect from this type of intervention, and which also help evaluators to better frame the evaluation questions and what are the type of findings that we may expect from this type of exercise.
Thank you. Just to add that there is a big difference, obviously, as I was saying, if we look at development projects or programs, the way the programming is done, the way the theory of change is, the way the strategies are developed, it's all very different than the world of where the starting point is research and science. And within that, I would say research for development is a bit broader than looking at the quality of science approach. One thing I would like to highlight, for example, we do look at quality issues, for example. Virtually any evaluation of development project would look at quality of issues in terms of funding, timing, adequacy, allocative efficiency. If there are products that are delivered in terms of capacity building or service delivery, there are indicators of quality of those too, and they are normally put under efficiency criteria, sometimes under effectiveness, because when you combine them, that's how you bring out bigger effectiveness and impact. But here, if we look at quality in terms of QoS, there are very heavy-duty indicators like bibliometric analysis and publications and so on at that output level when we look at the quality, which is very different in terms of development project quality assessment. So similarly, if we look at sustainability, there are significant differences getting there too, although we didn't focus explicitly on that evaluation. I would recommend that this is Rama Rao that knows, I think is Leon. We all are learning. I'm learning myself about quality of evaluation, quality of science evaluation, which is relatively new than development evaluations, and there's a lot more to learn and contribute. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those differences beyond what I had covered already. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. From my side, from the evaluation function side, I would highlight one that I always that is very interesting, because the use of theories of change. The theories of change in the research context are designed differently for different purposes and used differently. A lot of times it is for testing the hypothesis around the innovation that is done in the field. And this is something that we have found very fascinating, I would say, but also we have had to adjust to in how we do evaluations, because, for example, also theories of change are not used for program management as much, they're not used, there's rarely inputs that are mentioned, and assumptions that are behind theories of change are also presented usually in the way of hypothesis testing. So they're not kind of evidence-based assumptions that really already say what is known, based on existing evidence, but rather kind of, I wouldn't say wishful thinking, but it's just a very different way of designing and using theories of change. So that's one. Dr. Ramo, I think I know who you are because I've seen the visuals, but this is a good point of contribution to academics and the importance in developing countries. And I think Natascia highlighted this a lot in her remarks, especially around the role of national agricultural research institutes. But in the context of actual evaluation and mention of bibliometrics analysis, one example is looking at the co-authorship of publications and co-design and participation of academics and members of those national agricultural research institutes and academia in the countries in developing, I would say in the southern countries. That is what bibliometrics analysis allowed you to look at. And through this extensive field work that our teams have conducted, we went to 5 countries. That came out very loud. The engagement, the needs and deep engagement at different stages of research, from design to implementation to scaling of research innovations. And this is where the NARS come in very useful, and that's where the role is. We give the Parshuram Samal. We have a question about genetic innovation science group evaluation. We're not sure what the question is because we are talking about process now and more about the approach, but not the results. So maybe if you can clarify a question, and Ibtissem can take this on.
Svetlana, also there is a question from Gillian Lin who raised the hand.
Yeah, so let's stick with the previous one, and then we can take this one next. Parshuram? Oh, yeah.
Maybe I can give like few words about genetic innovation evaluation. And you can tell us, Parshuram, if this answers your question, or you can maybe put in the chat a more specific question. So in the context of this presentation, we didn't want to go deep into the 3 science groups evaluations, and we are interested, and we understand that you are more interested about the approach. So the genetic innovation science group is a science focused on genetic innovation. And we didn't explain how science groups operate, but maybe it's interesting for you to know that science groups as genetic innovation, this is the umbrella, science group is the umbrella, and under each science group there are, the program operates through what we call initiatives. Initiatives, it's also a subtopic of science group, and for genetic innovation you have, for example, an initiative working on market intelligence and bringing together strategic information on future crops, market segments, and trait priorities, and make sure they are aligned with the needs and preference of farmers, agribusiness, and consumers. Under each initiative there are work packages. And the specific evaluation of genetic innovation after consultation with the key stakeholders, they were more interested to understand and assess how the initiatives they are working together and how they were responding to the need of demand of local partners, especially NARS. So NARS, they are the National Agricultural Research and Extension Systems. So this was the big focus of the genetic innovation evaluation, and it was more on coherence, internal coherence, external coherence, and relevance. I hope this answers your question, and happy to answer more, or if you would like to specify further. Thank you.
Okay. We will share one more link to a blog by the genetic innovation team that went to Ghana, actually. So that's something that maybe will pique your interest. For the question about 3 to 5 years, yes, it is true that it has been 3 to 3 years, actually. Now it's extended in CGIAR, the project cycle, to 6 So it will hopefully give everybody more breathing space, but also hopefully it will give an opportunity to evaluate differently and consider seriously the midterm reviews, where the course connection can happen. But in general, it is similar, like 5-6 years. It is the usual standard duration of a development project. So that's we welcome this basically development. And but the impact consideration of long-term outcomes, short-term outcomes towards impact would still remain. Of course, that there is a change in all the work, and it goes into the 2030, and it goes into the impact, the SDG related impacts. So that will still be there. So thank you. Any other questions in writing or in speaking?
Yeah, Gillian Lynn has the hands raised.
Okay, I responded, but yes, if you want to clarify, maybe the question of how well you know CGIAR, it sounds like you do.
Two things. The first one is that I think that there needs to be some way to get away from this classification of legacy and current research, because even if you take a time frame of 10 years for an evaluation in the CG, you're still going to be dealing with legacy research. And I think that we need to find a way to deal with it rather than saying it's a problem. That's the first observation. Secondly, I'd like to thank Natascia and Krishna for some really interesting reflections from evaluators. It really got me thinking about some of the indicators that we have for evaluating quality of science. And I think it's been an extremely useful exercise. This issue of how do you evaluate effectiveness of outputs when you're looking at a snapshot in time I think is very critical. We have some indicators that are helpful, like positioning for use, but I agree they're subjective. And I think that's one area of the evaluation framework which definitely needs more attention, and especially where you're doing short-term evaluations. I mean, 3 years, as Svetlana said, is the norm. Sometimes it's 5 years, but there'll always be a snapshot. And so I found those reflections to be very useful. And I think that we need more discussion about how we go about that. So that's all I wanted to say.
So maybe, Jill, and as a closing, maybe you can introduce who you are in that process and why you know CGIAR so well.
Okay, yeah, well, I worked in the CGIAR for quite a long time, over a period off and on for about 35 years. And I have enjoyed very much working with Svetlana over the past 3 years on grappling with how you go about evaluating quality of science. So, and I come from a research viewpoint, so it's very interesting to hear reflections from evaluators as to how they've dealt with the framework.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, colleagues. Is there, Krishna, I think you raise a physical hand, so go ahead.
Thank you. To be honest, I mean, one learning, the more I think about it, overemphasizing quality of science and creating excitement amongst scientists and researchers that, yes, look at quality, may not always be productive if the goal is developmental change or transformative change, is something I'm hinting. Because if we get bogged down too much about publications and overly rigorous quality at the cost of investing in other aspects that require change, that warrant that kind of for change, then I think we need to strike a balance as well. I try to be a more balanced person because I've lived in developing world and development world and research world. So that's something that we have to bring out of this evaluation, because if we look at the number of outputs and not knowing what's happening, not even knowing any potential influence out of those in the near future, and the amount of investment that is going into it, that can be questioned by some development-minded stakeholders. That's my final word. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna, for one last important remark. I don't see any questions in the chat, and we are at the time. So I suggest we wrap up if there is one last chance to ask questions. But from our side, we welcome all of you joining us today. We will follow up afterwards with more links, but we won't. I think we shared enough, but you might not have access to those links after you leave the discussion. But we invite you to sign up to our newsletter, to follow the and to follow us in social media. If you want to know more about CGIAR and availability assessments in CGIAR, then in 3 hours we will have another session related to that. And that's much more methodological, and it will also actually cover the results of the availability assessments which are completed. So that's from our side. Thank you, colleagues. And the link to the availability assessment session is posted as well in the chat box. Thank you.